and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of Tuesday the 6th February 2024. The East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. A reminder for all councillors to please mute their computers. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has otherwise been granted by the Chair, and I have received no such applications. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until these issues are resolved. If technical issues cannot be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later date or time. I'd just like to start this evening by recognising the traditional custodians on the land that we meet on tonight, and say that East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai-Kurnai, Monero and Bidwell people as the traditional owners of this land that encompass East Gippsland Shire, and recognise their enduring relationship with country. The traditional owners have cared for and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of the following criteria. Firstly, that they can hear proceedings and be heard by other members in attendance, and secondly, that they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members. I'll now confirm with each of the councillors attending online in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and to note assurance from each that the location they are participating from is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Van Diggle, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Thank you, and can you assure us that the location you're participating from is secure?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Councillor White, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you.
And can you also assure us that the location you're participating from this evening is secure?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, John. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Good evening, Mayor. Yes, I can.
And can you confirm the location you are participating from is secure tonight?
Indeed it is.
Thank you very much. If a councillor participating electronically experiences technical difficulties during the meeting, we may adjourn briefly to enable the councillor to rejoin the meeting. Should the councillor be unable to reconnect within about 5 minutes, the meeting shall resume in the councillor's absence. Agenda item 1.2 is apologies. CEO, do we have any apologies for this evening's meeting?
We have no apologies, Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 1.3, declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, you've all read this evening's agenda. Are there any conflicts to declare? Councillor, yes, Councillor White.
Thank you. Giving careful consideration to the planning permit application of 5.1.1, the fact that I own a property in close proximity, and considering both sides of the argument, I feel that it would be not the right thing to do to participate in the debate, so I would wish to declare a conflict of interest when we get to that point in the meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor White. Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor. Just notifying you that I'll be declaring a conflict of interest at item 7.1 in the confidential section.
Understood.
And Mayor, I will also be declaring a conflict of interest for 7.1 and 7.2 in the confidential section.
Thank you.
And I will also be declaring a conflict of interest in item 7.1.
Thank you.
And I'll also declare a conflict of interest for 7.1.
Thank you. And those conflicts have been minuted. Very good. Thank you. We'll now move to 1.4, which is confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, do I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the previous council meeting held Tuesday the 12th of December are an accurate reflection of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Stowe. I think, thank you, Councillor Reeves. Happy to second that. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Is the motion opposed? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's passed unanimously. Agenda item number 1.5 is our next meeting, and the next meeting is scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 27th of February 2024 at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 o'clock. Agenda item 1.6, requests for leave of absence. Ms Weigel, are there any requests for leaves of absence?
There are no recorded requests for leaves of absence.
Thank you. Agenda item 1.7 is the open forum. The first item is 1.7.1, which is petitions. Ms Weigel, are there any petitions?
Thank you, Mayor. We have no petitions.
Thank you. Agenda item 1.7.2 is questions of council. Ms Weigel, are there any questions of council?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we do have some questions of council. We have two questioners, both of whom have asked two questions. Neither are in the gallery this evening, so I'll read out the questions and then direct them to the relevant General Manager for a response. The first two questions are from Mr Chris Wispler. Question one is, there is no footpath or bicycle paths from Eastwood Road to Lamandra Boulevard along the Great Alpine Road, even though there is a school bus stop midway. This stretch is thus very dangerous for both pedestrians and cyclists. My children are forced to walk in a ditch to avoid cars. When will a suitable footpath or bicycle path be built between Eastwood Road and Lamandra Boulevard in Bairnsdale? And I'll ask Mr Richards, Acting General Manager, Assets and Environment, to respond, please.
Thank you, CEO. I can advise that this section of footpath has been identified as a priority for future development. So we keep a record of all requests for new paths and priority paths, and we can assure Mr Wispler that this section has been recorded. However, I'm not able to provide a date for delivery as it's not yet identified within the capital program. I can advise, though, that work is underway on a proposal to increase Council's capacity to deliver new footpaths and shared paths.
Thank you. And the second question from the same member of the public is that the grey concrete water tower along Main Street, Bairnsdale, is a huge eyesore, visible for miles around. Will Council consider embracing the silo art concept, common elsewhere in Victoria, and paint the water tower? It could become a tourist attraction and feature a rotation of local artists. This question will be directed to Mr McConnell, the General Manager of Place and Community.
Thank you, CEO. It's a good question, and it's a question that we receive from time to time. And I would note, as with many of these questions, that members of the community have the opportunity to put the questions like this to council council officers at any time and receive an update. You don't need to wait to a council meeting, but that said, certainly the proposal to either paint a mural or do a projection on the water tower has been raised by a number of members of the community, and a group of community members has formed to promote this. The asset is actually an asset of East Gippsland Water, and so the question about permissions and promotion of that is one that is best directed to East Gippsland Water, and I know they're aware of this request. One thing to bear in mind is that the water tower is heritage listed, and so that needs to be taken into account in whatever proposals come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. The next set of questions are from Mr John Butler-Cole on behalf of the East Gippsland Ratepayers and Residents Association. There are again two questions. The first question is, the Local Government Act 2020 requires Council to consult with the community on its annual draft budget proposals. Can Council confirm in detail the improved consultation process it will adopt for the 24-25 budget so that it does not dismiss public submissions without clear and detailed discussion and debate? For this question, I'll ask for a response from Ms Johnson, our General Manager of Business Excellence. Thank you.
Thanks, Acting CEO. And I know that the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor have recently responded to similar questions from this member of the public. So I also thank you for that question. In terms of the draft budget, we are in the process of finalising the draft budget, but we can't actually release it until we get the property valuations, which are received by the Valuer General in later March. So what we did last year and what we propose to do again this year is to release it at an April meeting of Council for 4 weeks consultation, take on all of the feedback and then look to putting it up to a Council meeting for adoption in June. That's not to say that not at any point of the year members of the public can put in anything that matters that they want to see addressed as part of the budget. They can raise them at any time of the year. So, look, to reiterate, community consultation on the budget is really essential to this council to meet its obligations, and we're absolutely committed to transparency. Once the property valuations have been applied, we will be able to release the budget for further public consultation, but I would encourage any members of the public that have submissions that they want to put forward on the budget process to do that at any time of the year.
Thank you, Ms Johns. And the second question from the same member of the public representing the Ratepayer Group is that the Deputy Mayor has already declared by media release that the 2.75% rate cap will provide insufficient funds to meet the current requested budget from the administration. Can the community consultation process inform all stakeholders which services and expectations are being considered for reduction or to demonstrate required fiscal restraint? And again, the question to Ms Johnson as the General Manager of Business Excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting CEO. So as to the media release, what it was highlighting was the fiscal environment that all councils are working within when compared to increases in the state government service fee charges, which are substantially higher. So, you know, that's all still being considered as part of the budget process. As to specific services, we've got a service review policy that guides the way in which services are reviewed. The policy is publicly available on our website, and it's the basis for potential changes to services and budget restrictions. So it sets the principles that are used to guide service reviews and clearly outlines what consultation will be undertaken with internal and external stakeholders that have a role in the delivery, funding or receipt of the service. So I encourage the members of public to look at that particular policy that's available publicly on our website as to service reviews and as to what services we will be providing and consultation we will be doing.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Mayor, that concludes our questions to Council.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Agenda item 1.7.3 is public submissions. Do we have any public submissions?
We have 2 public submissions. Both are in relation to item 5.1.1 from Mr Patrick Carson and Ms Jacqueline Cannon. Both will be asked to present at the beginning of that actual agenda item.
Yes, understood. Agenda item number 1.8, items for tabling. Are there any items for tabling? Tonight's meeting, I believe not. Thank you.
No, Mayor.
Agenda item number 2, notices of motion. I believe there are none.
None have been received, Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is deferred business. I believe there is no deferred business for tonight's meeting.
No deferred business.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is councillor and delegate reports. Councillors, we've previously agreed that our delegates' reports will be submitted to be included in the meeting's minutes rather than read out verbatim in the meeting. So I encourage you all to submit those reports, which members of the public will be able to read in the minutes of this meeting. Which moves us on now to agenda item number 5, which is officer reports. The first report this evening is item 5.1.1, planning permit application 5 2018.32.3, 550 Metung Rd, Metung, use and development of the land for racing dog husbandry, excluding racing dog training, amendment to permit. Before the item is presented, I will now call Mr Patrick Carlson to make his submission, please. Patrick, if you wouldn't mind coming.
Sorry, Mayor, I think Councillor White is trying to gather your attention.
Sorry, Councillor White.
Yes, this is where I should sign off and go offline, and somebody could please notify me when this item is concluded.
Yes,
Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you, John. We'll make sure that you're notified when the item is concluded. And welcome, Patrick. If you just press the button on the microphone there so the red light is on so those online can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason for the application, this application seeks to reduce racing dog noise emanating from the property. It was undertaken with full consultation with council officers, where other options were discussed, including alternative properties, and it only proceeded on the advice from councillors being the preferred. So it was a surprise that it was recommended for refusal. The subject property is a working farm with livestock, farm machinery, sheds and outbuildings as you would see on any similar establishment. And as confirmed in the council officer's report, what is proposed is complying development. The applicant wishes to, again, go over and above to ensure that noise is contained. The original acoustic kennel is the only known private one in Victoria. We believe that the issue is this. Under the guidelines referenced for keeping of racing dogs in Victoria, puppies under 6 months old are not required to be housed overnight inside. If the application is refused, then that situation remains the same with the puppies remaining outside at night. This application seeks to provide accommodation within the second acoustic kennel for the puppies. It is also seeking sufficient accommodation for only 2/3 of the maximum allowable dogs according to the size of the property, and this is to facilitate the natural cycles in the dog's training and breeding programs, as not all dogs are race fit at all times. Additionally, the number of puppies fluctuate, therefore the second acoustic kennel is intended to cater for the maximum short-term periods rather than non-consistent maximum numbers. No correspondence has been received by the applicant from council within the last 18 months to pass on any noise complaints. And as noted in the council's report, during the last amendment process, objectors didn't take a diary when requested, however, the applicant did, so no cross-checking can be done. As noted, it is a working farm, and as such, noise from livestock is exempt from EPA noise restrictions. And when we asked for confirmation that the acoustic engineer recorded only dog noise from the subject property and not from any of the numerous pet dogs that reside in close proximity, nor from the property within 500 metres that temporarily houses dogs, or when we asked for a copy of the acoustic engineer's report, it was not provided. The possible issues. Visual amenity. The second proposed acoustic kennel is positioned side by side with the existing and perpendicular to the machinery shed. It's designed to look like a farm shed, and apart from being slightly longer than the first kennel, won't create any additional visual mass when looking from Metung Rd or Hardy's Road. The construction. The guidelines for the construction of acoustic kennel allow for two options, either exactly as prescribed or an alternative that needs to be a tested system. The first kennel was to the latter, with concrete tilt panel walls and glazed doors, and this either met or exceeded the requirements. And this application for the second kennel is exactly as per the guidelines with no deviation. So in summary, we respectfully ask that the councillors consider why council should reject a complying development request that is aiming to further reduce noise if it is noise that forms the officer's basis for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Carson. I'll now call Ms Jacqueline Kennan to make her submission. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Excuse me, Mayor, I have a question of process. Is it possible to ask a question of the last speaker?
Yes, Councillor Buckley. Look, it would have been much better if you'd done that when Mr Carson was at the microphone. So you may
He did it. He moved really quickly. Sorry, he was out of that seat before I had a chance to hit the microphone.
So look, I'm happy to allow you to ask a question. That's fine.
Yeah, I apologise, Mayor, for my tardiness. Look, my question is just pertaining to the sound, which is the main issues of complaints that we've had. I just need to gain a little bit of understanding about Is the sound just the puppies, or does the sound become a problem with the exercising and feeding of the animals, or when they're taken outside of the acoustic buildings? And so I don't, that's just one question that I have.
It's a good question. We don't know. We haven't been provided with any of the documentation that states when the noise complaints have been made, at what times during the day or evening. There's no training of the dogs on this property. They're only housed on the property. So we presume that the noise would be emanating from puppies at night that are allowed to stay outside of the kennel, and that's why we're proposing the second acoustic kennel.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr Carson. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Jacqueline will now allow you to present to us. Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a little bit of history. My husband and I moved to Kings Cove in 2011 and finally into a property on 2013. We selected the property based on its amenity and location close to Metung Village, and also quiet farmland, realising that there are livestock around and similar residential properties. We visited the property frequently during the day and at night because we'd had previous experience with uncontrolled barking at a previous residence. In about 2016, after we'd moved into the property, we started being troubled by day and nighttime barking and howling emanating from 550 Metung Road, and made complaints to council. At that time, there was only the exercise runs and a large shed on the property. We were advised by rangers that they had spoken to the owners that one of the boys would be staying on site in a caravan to manage the dogs. At the time, Harley Whelan, who, as the dogs were already racing under Lakeview Kennels banner, had an article in the October 2015 which said that they had 15 dogs on the property at the time, with 5 racing dogs and a few pups coming through. We continued to make numerous complaints about the day and nighttime howling and barking emanating from the property. We kept barking dog diaries as requested, but often they were dismissed as they were not concordant with other people's diaries. The rangers fed back that the owners took the complaints seriously and would address the issue. However, barking and howling would be reduced for a period of time and then resume. Despite the VCAT ruling, as it went to VCAT in 2020, after the request for an increase in the number of dogs, specifying that the permitted dogs would be kept in acoustic rated kennels from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m, and that screening controls would be put in place to prevent triggering of the dogs from external stimuli, the nighttime and early morning barking and howling continued. We and other affected residents continued to make complaints to council about the non-compliance with barking controls and prevention strategies. We continued to get assurances that it would be managed. Since 2015, I note that in the report from the officers it talks about health impacts. I have suffered from several illnesses which cause chronic pain and are exacerbated by sleep disturbances and stress and require considerable medication. The pack barking and howling emitting from the property at night and early morning has caused me to wake suddenly from deep sleep. Even if the dogs only howl and bark for a minute or so, it is disruptive and makes it difficult to return to sleep, as I have felt on high alert. Even though our property is outside the 500-metre boundary, the dog howling has often felt like these animals are just outside in the street opposite my bedroom window. Daytime pack barking and howling is often of a longer duration and affects our neighbours' quiet enjoyment of our properties. I have a question as how many dogs are currently at 550 Metung Road. The proposed permit amendment is for 34 racing dogs. Greyhounds can have up to 11 pups per litter. Racing dogs' careers range from 18 months to 5 years, but greyhounds have a lifespan of about 10 to 14 years. The code of practice for greyhounds in Victoria requires owners to transition dogs to retirement and rehoming once they finish their career or are deemed unsuitable for racing or breeding. This is usually on their properties. Greyhound Victoria holds all records of all greyhounds bred for racing from birth to death, and council should be able to access this information. So while there are 16 racing dogs permitted currently, plus an unidentified number of puppies under 6 months, how many dogs are actually on the property which don't fall under the category of racing and could be contributing to the noise? Any additional dogs or pups potentially contribute to current and future barking and howling nuisance emitting from the property, and this is our concern. We also dispute that the current screening of outward views from the kennels and runs is compliant. The buildings and runs are visible from the property in Hardy's Road on the south side of the kennels, and while we don't mind what they look like, it is the fact that they can trigger the dogs to bark. Tree planting is sparse along Hardy's Road, the Hardy's Road property boundary, and along the boundary with Metung Rd. Kennels are easily visible from driving past the property. The existing outside runs are not screened on all sides, despite visible livestock grazing on the adjacent Hardy Road property and the owner's paddocks next to the kennels. They are often have been sheep and cattle right next to where the runs are and the existing acoustic kennel. These can trigger the dogs both during the night and the day if they are visible. While we acknowledge that all greyhounds on site should have access to fresh air and exercise outside their soundproof kennels, it is the residents' collective experience that over 7+ years that barking and howling is not well managed. The 500-metre compliance boundary becomes irrelevant when the local topography and the positioning of the kennels, which was noted in the 2020 VCAT hearing as not being ideal, but the Whelans were given consideration for the amount of infrastructure they already had in place, and the officer from the council at the time agreed that it should have been on the other side of the property, away from residential properties. There was another question in the report that said, or I think it was from in the architect's letter, that are we sure that it's actually the greyhounds that are doing the barking? The greyhounds actually have a very high-pitched howl and they bark as a pack once triggered, and we can distinguish between those and the isolated other barking of 1 or 2 dogs in the area.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Councillor Stowe, you have a question of clarification of the Speaker. Jacqueline, just before you disappear. Thank you.
Hi, Kathleen. Could I just ask you where you live?
I live on Kings Cove in the Terrace in Metung.
Sorry, the address?
The 32 The Terrace. So
Okay.
we're actually just on the other side of the golf course.
Yeah, the reason I was just Googling it, so you'd be roughly 400 k's away in a straight line?
Not
400 k's, 400 metres away?
I think we go outside the 500-metre boundary,
Outside
but we seem to get the sound directed at us, as do some of our neighbours.
Okay.
So,
well, forgetting the neighbours, in your case, at 500 metres, a fairly loud sound, you're telling me?
Depending on the weather conditions, it can be, I can wake up suddenly and it sounds like they're just outside my window. And it's not just a barking, it is a high-pitched howling, and it just jolts you awake. If the acoustic kennels were used properly for all dogs on the property, then there should be no nighttime noise. But we often hear noise at 11 p.m, 4:30 a.m. seems to be a frequent one, despite the dog's not supposed to be being fed until 7 a.m. Outside the acoustic kennel. So it's just, over time, there just seems to have been constant assurances that the right thing would be done to manage the dogs. Things improve for a little while and then fall apart. And I'm just worried that there are other dogs on the property, other greyhounds not considered racing, which will not be housed in an acoustic kennel. And I note that the new proposed kennel will only have, if it's for the additional 18 dogs and it's for 24 dogs in total, that only allows for 6 puppies. I'm not quite sure how you manage litters just to have 6 puppies that need to be housed overnight to control all noise.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Greeson, you also had a question.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I just ask if those people in the gallery are residents of, and if they've all, Jackie, have they all got the same concerns?
Yes. And this is not all of them. either.
No, thank you. My question was to Jackie.
Question of clarification, yes.
Thank you. And just one more question, Jackie. Because I've been to visit and try and some time ago and try and understand what's been happening. And I think at one stage you said that after the acoustic testing and discussions between council officers and the proponent, that the barking actually stopped. There was a period of time when there was...
It seemed when the kennels, because it was also over COVID, when the acoustic kennels was built and the dogs were housed in it, we actually had to approach planning and ask, was it in fact built? And they said yes, because we were still continuing to hear barking. And that's when I think the acoustic monitoring was done in 2022 to see if there was an issue, because it was stated that the kennel was compliant, soundproof, but it obviously wasn't, according to the acoustic engineer who inspected it. But the thing is that we continue to still hear it is not as bad, but our concern is also that if you have more dogs on the property, adjacent to residential areas when they should have been really located on the other side of the property, they're outside for exercise, that you will also get increased barking and annoyance during the day. And that's not why we moved to Metung.
Thanks, Jackie.
We're not against dogs.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
General Manager for Place and Community, would you now please present your report? Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report seeking the issue of a notice of refusal to amend the planning permit 5.218.32.2 for use and development of the land for racing dog husbandry, excluding racing dog training. And in accordance with our planning delegation policy, this matter has been called up by councillors for consideration. As you've heard, this matter is a challenging one to work our way through. Some of the key points I think that are worth councillors turning your mind to. There is a detailed and complex permit history which is set out in the officer's report, dealing with greyhounds kept on the property in a farming zone adjacent to low-density residential zone on the Metung settlement boundary. Since the operation commenced in 2017, council's fielded ongoing complaints from the public regarding howling dogs, primarily with concerns in the early morning period, which results in residents experiencing or reporting experience of disturbed sleep. The existing permit was approved by VCAT, then amended by council to provide an acoustic shed rather than outdoor kennels, as was originally considered and endorsed. Matters relating to compliance of the existing use have been discussed somewhat tonight, but are a separate matter to the assessment of this application for the proposed expansion. However, the amenity impacts from the existing activity have informed officers' consideration of the application and its assessment against the relevant provisions of the planning scheme. The existing permit limits the number of dogs, excluding puppies 6 months and younger, to 16, and the application seeks to increase that number to 34. The application would also provide additional acoustic shed construction meeting animal welfare standards. The relevant planning requirements set standards for racing dog keeping, and the proposal is exempt from notice and review where the standards are met. It's considered that the standards are met in relation to the proposal. Despite the standards being met, there is an additional policy considerations and existing amenity impacts being experienced near the site. The report indicates some of the potential ambiguity as to the cause of the amenity impact, but overall is considered that the responsible recommendation is to refuse the current proposal. So the officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of refusal to amend the planning permit for the grounds set out. I do note the applicant has the option to seek review of that decision, if that is council's decision at VCAT. So with me this evening is Manager Planning Martin Richardson and Robert Pringle, our Coordinator of Statutory Planning, to assist with any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions. They don't relate specifically to the planning application though, but they're questions that have been raised by people who've spoken this evening mostly. So I just wondered, because we're considering noise, the issue of noise on this, in this application, so I think the questions are relevant. I just wondered if we could please have a comment regarding the fact that the applicant was directed or guided by council to submit for a proposal on this particular site, and so they feel shortchanged that now there's a recommendation to refuse.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. So the applicant came to us and said that there were a couple of options, that the kennel could be, the proposed additional kennel could be placed on the current site, or it could be placed on an adjoining property in the same family ownership at 80 Hardies Road, which is closer to the residential areas that we're referring to. Our advice was that we would rather deal with an application on the current site, because that might lead to some benefits in terms of our hope that might provide some opportunity for the existing noise problems to be addressed on the site with the additional kennel. We certainly, well, we made it clear that our view was that we didn't want to be dealing with an application on a site which was actually closer to residences. There was no implication in our advice that we would support the application. We never do that. We never say to someone, you'll get approval. Yep. What we said was, in terms of the options available, we felt that it was better for the application to be lodged for 550 Metung Road, because A, that was further away from the residences than the alternative site, and secondly, there might be an opportunity for the existing noise problems to be addressed through that additional application.
Yep. Thank you. Mr Carson mentioned something about the livestock is exempt from requirements in the farming zone. Would you comment on that, whether or not we can consider noise in this application?
We can certainly consider noise from racing dogs because they're not livestock.
Okay, thank you.
Cows,
easy.
sheep, horses don't count, but racing dogs under a planning permit are subject to the standard noise requirements, EPA noise requirements. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I had one more quick question,
yes, please. Go ahead.
I was wondering whether the owners were given the opportunity to alter their practices in response to noise complaints. So has council, I understand that council has received lots of complaints about noise. Were those complaints then passed on to the owner to give them an opportunity to do something about the management of the dogs?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mayor, it's not our practice to pass complaints on to owners because there are all sorts of confidentiality issues associated with those. We can't provide the names and addresses of people who provide us with information. We do, in the case where we commissioned the acoustic report, so the 3 or 4 months after I started at the Shire, I was made aware of various complaints. We commissioned the acoustic report to try to get some understanding of what the cause was. As a result of that report, there were a number of fairly minor non-compliance issues in relation to the building design, door seals and various things that could have been contributing to noise escaping from the building. The acoustic engineer visited the property with permission, inspected the site, and we identified a couple of rectification matters that could be undertaken. Patrick put forward some information about that, provided certification that those matters had been addressed. So the physical imperfections, if you like, in the application were addressed. I did receive some information from residents shortly after that the noise appeared to have been abated, but then quite quickly the complaints commenced again. We haven't undertaken detailed discussions with the applicant about the management of the property. It's a quite difficult issue to address because we can't have an officer on site overnight to monitor that. But it is a matter that we will need to follow up, because it's apparent now that the noise is continuing despite the physical rectification of the buildings, and I guess my observation would be that it probably comes down to how the dogs are managed. So that's a matter that we will have to follow up. Just briefly on that matter, our approach to this is that we felt we needed to deal with this application first, get that sorted, and then depending on the outcome, or actually regardless of the outcome, we need to continue to follow up in terms of the ongoing complaints. And to me, that turns to the question of how the property is being managed.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much for those responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Buckley, you had a question?
Councillor Uri pretty much picked me at the post on all my queries, other than just to understand that there hasn't been an acoustic report presented to the applicant, and that's my understanding. And the second question is in regards to if the applicant does...
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, you were just breaking up then. If you wouldn't mind just repeating your second question.
I apologise. I think I've got bad internet because I'm having a bit of connectivity issues hearing you as well, Mayor, just to note. So the second question is, if the applicant takes this matter to VCAT, then that would be at the cost of the ratepayers, correct? And what type of cost would that involve?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. The first question, I must admit I can't recall being directly asked for a copy of the acoustic report, but I'd be happy to provide that to the applicant, because the acoustic report not only identifies some areas of non-compliance for the building, but also provides data in relation to noise levels. I must say it might be my oversight that I might not have responded to a request for the report, but we are able to provide that report to the applicant, which may assist. The second question in relation to VCAT, so if there is a third-party appeal, that is the applicant appeals to VCAT, which is actually the only option because there are no third-party appeal rights for residents. But if the council were to refuse the application and the applicant were to apply to VCAT, then in essence the cost of lodging that application is the applicant's to bear. Costs borne by council in relation to VCAT hearings are simply officer time. So we have to attend directions hearings and prepare submissions and that sort of thing, but it's not part of the normal business process that we obviously have to defend council's decisions, and we do that at the most cost-effective way, which is to get the officers to do it.
And if I may indulge, Mayor,
Please.
a supplementary question. Is it possible to make amendments to the plan to have the building further away from the residential boundaries and to quieten the noise? Is that a possibility to have an alteration to the permit, or is that not possible?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. It's possible for any application to be amended if the applicant wishes to amend the application. In some circumstances, we can request an amendment to the application. We don't do that very often because, again, it's probably a leading matter to do. If we say put it over there, then there's an implication that we're happier, and it's a council determination. So it is possible for the applicant to amend an application at any point, and that's a fairly straightforward process that allows for a reassessment.
So if it was declined at this meeting, there's nothing to stop the applicant to go and make an amendment and bring it back to council again. Is that the way it would proceed? That would be the process?
Thanks, Councillor. And again, through you, Mayor, it is possible for the applicant to do that. It's more common if the council issues a notice of refusal for the applicant to take the VCAT course. And at VCAT, the applicant can lodge an amended plan. So that often happens, is that you get to VCAT and the applicant says, well, I've got an alternative here that might better address the planning issues. That's a possibility. But yes, you're right. If the applicant wished to, they could lodge an amended plan if there was a refusal issued. But and look, that's their choice. But often the more effective way of dealing with a refusal is to actually go to VCAT and have it determined by the umpire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greeson, I believe you were next.
Thank you. Martin, are you able to give us detail about the acoustic testing?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, indeed I am. So I'll just go to the acoustic assessment, which it's a little bit technical, noise measurement, but in any event. So what acoustic testing does is it measures background noise, like insects and cars and things like that, and you get a background level. The existing background levels, and I'll do day, evening and night, are 37 decibels, 42 decibels and 28, so 28 during the deep period of the evening. The background levels count to 42 in the day period, 47 in the evening and 33 in the night, and the measured results exceed those by, on average, 2 to 4 decibels. So background level during the day is 42, measured result 46. Evening period background level 47, measured result 48 decibels. And the critical one, night period, background level 33 decibels, measured results 45. So quite in excess of the background levels. Again, I just might add that, you know, the commentary around, are we sure that it's those dogs? I think there's enough evidence to suggest that it's not dispersed animals barking from time to time. And I've heard audios that some of the objectors have sent. The audio is clearly a pack of dogs quite close to the building, and the acoustic engineer was able to confirm, without necessarily, you know, going up to the site to check, was able to say, based on his experience, that this was a pack of dogs in close proximity to the point of measurement.
Thank you, Martin. How far away from 550 Metung Road were these tests done?
They were done at the nearest, what's called sensitive receptor, so the nearest dwelling, which is in Hardage Road, and my estimate would be probably 350 to 400 metres from, that's just an estimate looking at the mapping. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, are there any further questions? No, I see none. In that case, there is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Greason. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Reeves. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you very much. I'm supporting the officer's recommendation. I've been aware of this issue for some time now and have visited the area and heard the dogs and been concerned about it. Barking dogs are waking people through the night. So obviously this kind of sleep disturbance increases people's anxiety, increases, you know, systemic adrenaline and cortisol levels, increases blood pressure, increases risks of heart disease, increases anxiety. It's clearly disruptive to people's lifestyles and, you know, desire to live a peaceful life in a beautiful location. So I think the officer's recommendation is sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'm happy to speak to this, and I agree with the officers and that they have considered the proposal in accordance with the relevant policies and zone, and they've given consideration, and I have, to the previous VCAT decision, and I agree that the proposal, although it's compliant with the planning requirements, fails to adequately protect the neighbours in a residential development from the unnecessary amenity from the noise. I think that this gets to the heart of what is often the case in our region around conflict of use and separation of activities. And this is a classic example of we have an opportunity to separate those activities. We can't actually move the residents, but we can actually move the activity away from the residents. I don't think you want to move your houses, do you? No, I don't think that's reasonable. I hear the concerns of the residents and I recognise the challenges for both the operator and the residents, and it must be terrible, as Councillor Greason has noted. And I agree that I fail to see how an increase in numbers will mitigate the issues that are already in existence from the existing numbers and increasing it by 18 or 24 or whatever the number is. And despite the conditions previously applied, history has shown that the practices have failed to be able to mitigate or control the issues of amenity for the residents. And in consideration of the activities proposed, which are dog racing, husbandry, I'm interested and concerned to note that the EPA requirements apply in this setting, in dog husbandry, as opposed to other animal husbandry. It's a complex matter. I agree that it is challenging, and I know that for some councillors that this decision or the recommendation may be anathema to them, but I have to agree with the recommendation of the officers, and I'll be supporting this, and I hope you do too, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the reason that I oppose this motion is, with all due respect to the people with noise, etc., is that we've just recently passed a rural land use strategy, which has been years in the making. And that is to address the conflict between fringe urban areas and rural uses. Clearly, this is a rural use. It ticks all the boxes. That was what this strategy was for. We've only passed it 6 months ago. At the first test, it's surrender. I believe that there's bigger issues at play here. And, you know, listening about the noise, the thing that came out to me immediately was, where's the compliance? Obviously, people have been putting in complaints about the noise. If nothing's been done from a compliance point of view, then we've been negligent. So for that reason, I think that this recommendation is wrong, and I will vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak for the motion. The reason being that, and taking into account Councillor Allen's comments, I think I can see what you're pointing to, but I don't think that makes an application exempt from considering the amenity of any proposal or activity like this. And from what we've heard, I think the complaints of noise are to be taken very seriously. I'm a little surprised that the applicant is maybe saying they weren't aware, or they, maybe not as aware as they should have been of the level of distress that the barking was caused. I think if I was the applicant, I would be talking to the neighbours and finding out whether the things I was putting in place were being effective or not. And if I wanted to expand, I would make sure that the things that I was doing were making a difference and causing less distress to the neighbours. I can't see that approving the application to extend this property, the sheds and so on, and the numbers of dogs will in any way benefit the neighbours and the level of complaint. So I support the motion to refuse. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case, Councillor Greason, as the mover of the motion, I'll give you a right of reply, if you would like it.
Thank you. I think that it's, the lifestyle of these people who live there and are interrupted all the time by the barking has to be taken into account. I think the issue of compliance is really important, but that's not what this is about. We still have an issue of compliance with the existing, 16 or 18 dogs. And as Martin Richardson's already pointed out, that's something that the council is going to have to follow up. So I don't see that is, I do understand about, the rural land use strategy and all the work that went into that and the discussions, etc. But this is an issue that's been there for longer than the rural land use strategy. So it's, and the problems have been associated with that have been there for a lot longer than that strategy. So I think we need to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? And those against? The motion is passed. Carried. Thank you, everybody. The next report is item 5.1.2, application for a planning permit. We might just take a short break to afford people the opportunity to leave if they would like to, and to get Councillor White back into the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Agenda item 5.1.2, application for a planning permit, use and development of a solar energy facility at 910 Princes Highway, Bairnsdale. General Manager for Place and Community, would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report seeking consent for officers to respond to a planning permit application where the Minister for Planning is the responsible authority in relation to a proposal for a renewable energy facility, a solar facility, at 910 Princes Highway, Bairnsdale. Some of the points for consideration. So firstly, whereas normally council would be the decision maker in relation to a planning permit, in this case, the Minister is the responsible authority. They make the decision in relation to the planning permit, as the renewable energy facility will generate more than 1 megawatt of energy. So that's the threshold. Public notice of the proposal has been given by the Department of Planning, and the views and recommendations of council are to be taken into consideration, as well as there is an opportunity for members of the community to make submissions also. We are aware of some public interest in the proposal, but at this stage we're not aware of the detail of whether, or indeed the detail, of any submissions that may have been lodged with the department in relation to this one. Assessment of the proposal against the provisions of the East Gippsland planning scheme have been undertaken. There are a few comments and recommended conditions that have been suggested in the draft submission included in your papers, including a recommendation in relation to improved screening and landscaping requirements. And I should also note an expectation around appropriate fire management practices to be in place given the battery storage. Overall, it's considered that there will be minimal impacts to the power station road from the proposal. So officers' recommendation is for council to endorse the draft submission to the Minister. And with me this evening again is Martin Richardson and Rob Pringle to assist with any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Stowe.
Stuart, I note that the proposal's in fairly close proximity to the airport. Do we have a look at that situation? And if so, is it an issue with planes coming in and out?
I might just ask Manager Planning to respond.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. The planning report that accompanies and other reports that accompany the application do address issues of glare and glint. I'm not sure what the difference is. The glare and glint report does a kind of a risk assessment based on overhead, talks about flight paths, talks about passing traffic, etc., and provides information which I've followed through to indicate that the proposed facility is sufficient distance from the normal approach paths for the aerodrome to not present a problem. We do have, as councillors might be aware, we have had some discussions about a proposed solar farm in Anderson's Lane, which is more aligned with the flight paths into the airport, but actually further away. But in this particular case, the report that's provided with the application indicates that there is unlikely to be any effect in relation to approach or departure paths from the runways at the airport.
Thank you. And can I ask you, when the project's complete, what will visitors coming into Bairnsdale see?
If the Minister adopts the proposals for the landscaping on the southern boundary of the Princes Highway, they'll see a whole lot of landscaping. There's nothing height-wise in this, the panels are this high above the ground. There's the structures for the batteries that are possibly 3 or 4 metres high but are screened by walls. And the proposal is that there would be significant landscape screening on the Princes Highway frontage, in fact all of the boundaries. And so obviously it might take some time for that landscaping to grow, but basically what they'll see when it's completed is trees, shrubs.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Mayor. I note that this is to put in a submission on the thing, and I also note that there's been proposed for quite a few years to upgrade Power Station Road north of this proposal, but given the amount of traffic that will be used in the construction phase, I would imagine, getting all those panels and things in. Is it unreasonable to suggest that there may be a contribution to that upgrade?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, to be blunt, yes, it probably is unreasonable. So having checked with our roads manager, the proposal to upgrade Power Station Road is an upgrade of the section north of the proposed access. So the section between the Princes Highway and the proposed access to the proposed facilities in pretty good nick. It gets really rough when you get north of that, approaching the railway line and then through to Bairnsdale-Dargo Road. So the proposal to upgrade Power Station Road is to deal with that section, which will not be used by traffic associated with the facility. The traffic report indicates that during the construction phase there'll be 1 to 2 heavy vehicle movements per day to get the materials there, but they will be on the existing section of Power Station Road, which is in good condition. And it seems unlikely with that level of traffic that there would be any concerns about damage to the road.
Worth a try.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious about the, there's some concern in the community, and I don't know whether it's well-founded or not because I haven't seen the data, but about fires associated with lithium batteries. I wonder if there are any guidelines to guide our thinking and the suggested condition on this that be paid attention to.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Councillors will be aware that Councillor Greason asked the question last week, so we've actually modified the submission to cover that. There is a guideline which is the design guidelines and model requirements for renewable energy facilities. It's a CFA guideline in 2022, and it talks about, and the bushfire or the fire assessment for this proposal includes significant reference to that guideline and the various risk management strategies that would be in place. You know, accessible firefighting facilities, water supply, access arrangements, various other things. So there's quite a list of requirements in those guidelines for these kinds of facilities. And councillors may note that we've included reference to that in the proposed comments, and we have also suggested a condition which says a fire management plan is to be prepared to the satisfaction of the responsible authority, outlining the specific risk management strategies that will be implemented in the design and operation of the facility, and that the fire management plan is to form part of the endorsed plans. So not only have we got a report saying here's what we'll do, we're suggesting to the Minister that that should be tied to the permit and therefore become a mandatory requirement.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Greason.
Thank you. There are some extensive conditions in here, been carefully thought through. Is the Minister for Planning going to take them into account? I'm sure you know the answer to that.
Thanks, Councillor. I think the answer to that through you, Mayor, is you better ask the Minister for Planning. Look, I would say so. So the Minister's advisors or departmental planners will say, here's a whole lot of conditions that we would normally put on these things. They'll have a lot more experience in that than we will. And I would hope, and I'm confident, that they will also say, and the local council has suggested these conditions, so let's work them into it. I'm confident that the Minister would adopt them because many of them are just standard practice, construction management plans, drainage plans, etc. The landscaping one is there as a bit of a backup because there was a little bit of a discrepancy in the plans about landscaping, and so we've sort of said, hey, you better make sure this landscaping's done. I'm confident that these conditions are all reasonable and that the Minister would adopt them in making a decision. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Uri, another question?
Yes, apologies, I should have asked before. And this question has been asked before and I've forgotten what the answer was, so forgive me. But I wondered whether there's any local benefit to this solar farm, should it proceed, please? How does it work, feeding into the grid?
Thanks, Councillor. I'm not entirely across this, but my understanding is that basically, yes, it's being fed into the grid, so there's a benefit to the state of Victoria. And one would hope that that benefit would be enjoyed by the people of East Gippsland in general. There's no obvious requirement for us to, and it'd be a bit of a stretch to say we want all the power, but it'll go into the grid, it'll reduce the state's reliance on fossil fuels. That's basically the general benefit, and one would hope that every power bill paying resident of East Gippsland might end up benefiting for that in the long term.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. Being a pilot's daughter, I'm somewhat sceptical to believe that there won't be any issues in regards to glare and glint, having approached the airport many occasions and being blinded on approach just by, certain car mirrors and all sorts of other different reflections that can happen, and this is quite sizable. So I do have a concern about that. I also have a concern about the batteries, and although I feel that there's been some great work done around ensuring that the project, would the landscaping pose a threat or create a condition, which it's obvious that it's going to be an eyesore, so a barrier is necessary between the highway and the plant itself, but would that indeed be, placing the plant at more risk because of the fuel potential of landscaping? So that's my first question. And the second question is, are the batteries to be ethically sourced? Because it's of a great concern that a lot of, the batteries and the rare minerals that go into them are quite often sourced in third world countries. So do you have any idea about where the batteries will be sourced from? Are they ethically sourced?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. The first question, the guidelines for fire management that I referred to earlier set minimum setback distances from boundaries, and those are met. So even with the landscaping around the perimeter of the property, the setback distances from boundaries are met, and there are setback distances from significant vegetation, so they are met. In relation to the second matter, I understand it's a significant question, but I will say that for us it doesn't come into the planning assessment. We don't ask people who are building houses whether the bricks are ethically sourced. It's not look, I'm not at all suggesting that it's not a relevant question, but in a planning assessment, it's not really something that we would normally consider. Yeah.
And also, just my final question: how long does the plant life be for the actual plant? How long will it last? And knowing that, does it have any effects on the arable land because of the well, I suppose that, look, the question is why aren't we having those solar panels lifted a little bit higher and a little bit further apart so the grass can grow and animals can graze under it? Does that pose a risk?
Thanks, Councillor Buckley, and through you again, Mayor. In relation to the second question, it's not proposed in this proposal, which I have seen in others, where it's proposed to graze sheep under solar panels. But my understanding of the report is that the solar panel spacing does allow for the grass to grow. It might not grow as well as it could. But I guess the important question, the first one, Councillor, is that we're looking at about a 30-year life for the panels. The options that are outlined in the report are either that the facility would be upgraded at the appropriate time to give it a longer lifespan, or that the panels would be removed entirely from the site, and therefore, in relation to your question, the site would be returned to grazing purposes. And that's a consideration here, is that whilst the land is obviously alienated, and bearing in mind that it's a relatively small property and isn't high-class soils, with this proposal it doesn't permanently alienate the land from agricultural use, and if the proponent wished to, in fact they'll be required to, if they close the facility, everything will have to be removed and then the property could be returned to grazing.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? No, I see none, in which case we have an officer recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Allen, seconder, Councillor Urey. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only to say that I think that this proposal ticks a lot of the boxes in that it's adjacent to transmission lines, given that the gas station is across the road, and I've read the report from end to end, and if we've got to sacrifice agricultural land for these uses, this is probably one of the better places to put it.
Thank you, Arthur. Mendy?
Yes, I'm very happy to support this application, and I urge other councillors to do the same. I think it's an appropriate use of this land. It's well sited, and as we've heard, it won't take out the agricultural land in the future for potentially going back to a more agricultural use. I think we need to support these proposals where we can to encourage the rapid swap over to renewable energy as a matter of urgency. And I think approving this application will be go some way towards that as a small step. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which, no? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. The next report is item 5.1.3, East Gippsland Bushfire Recovery Final Progress Report. General Manager for Place and Community, could you please present your report to the Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I present to you the fourth Bushfire Recovery Progress Report, which focuses on the action supporting communities to recover following the 1920 Black Summer fires. It's just a bit over 4 years since those fires, and so there's a significant amount of work that's occurred through this time, and this report focuses particularly on the work over the last year. It incorporates the insights and input and contributions from community recovery committees, from council, from agency, and it recognises the very substantial contributions to recovery from community volunteers, which I think is really important, as well as leaders and various agencies. And I should also at this time just recognise the funding support that's been provided to council and to community from both state and federal government, which is important. I think it's important to recognise when we're talking about this fourth progress report that recovery is a long journey, and whilst we're suggesting that this is the last of the formal progress reports that occur, Council is continuing to support the recovery efforts of our community, and particularly things like working closely with individuals rebuilding and supporting them through that process. And that work will continue, and we have support from state and federal governments for that through to at least mid-25. So there's still plenty of work to occur in that respect. Some of the highlights we might want to just focus on. There's been work with 10 community recovery committees through that time, which has been significant. 116 events, community events, which have been really important in promoting connection and wellbeing within communities. Through some of the funds that were allocated to council, we've continued outreach and trauma counselling by Royal Flying Doctor Service and the Royal Relationships Australia, Victoria. So that's been an important contribution. 16 more private properties have been rebuilt, and we're continuing to work with others who are in various stages of that progress. Council has delivered, early in the process, the focus was on restoration of assets that had been burnt, like the Malakuta foreshore infrastructure. More recently, it's been on various upgrade projects, and particularly some of those that were identified as priorities for community. And so far, we have delivered or are delivering some $50 million worth of bushfire recovery projects, which is a really significant contribution. And of that, nearly $40 million of that is external funding from state and federal government, which is really, really important. Again, there's been significant work with Aboriginal community and work there, particularly workshops focused on their preparedness for future emergency events, which is significant work, and more to happen in that place. As we sit here now, a number of the key economic recovery projects have been delivered. So key things like the new facilities for Tambo Honey, Metung Hot Springs, Riviera Nordic have all been delivered, which is really significant in enhancing the tourism offer in East Gippsland. And importantly, too, we've made some significant advances in terms of our planning with local communities for their emergency preparedness for the future and upgrading community facilities so that they are better able to support communities if there is an event of this kind again in the future. So there's a really significant body of work. Again, I don't want to underplay the fact that I can't underplay the fact that there is still more work to be done, and Council will continue to support that recovery work. But I think it's also important to recognise the work that has been done, and so I commend to you the fourth progress report, and you have a recommendation there in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Uri.
Thank you. I know when we first were elected to council and this work was all fairly new, I was really pleased, as I'm sure others were, that there was a particular pillar for Aboriginal recovery and community recovery. I can see that that's in this report as well. It's mentioned, but there's a link to a separate document. Could you just comment a little bit about that, please, Stuart, about how that's sort of been managed or incorporated into the overall recovery process?
Thanks, Councillor Uri. So I do note that this was the first event where, at least in Victoria, the state identified the importance of a dedicated focus around Aboriginal cultural healing and recognising the grief caused by both displacement and also by damage to the natural environment. So that's an important step. In this, some of the things which were most important, and this has been led more by Emergency Recovery Victoria than by Council. They had dedicated Aboriginal staff to assist in this, both centrally and locally, but has been the development of a strategy for Aboriginal community-led recovery. And so there's a whole range of projects within that. Some of them about emergency preparedness, like the one I mentioned earlier, and some work that's happening with the Lake Tyers Aboriginal Trust to create an appropriate facility there. But it is really about, in that aspect, and also empowering Aboriginal community to support themselves more effectively in future events.
Councillors, are there any further questions? I see none. Councillors, there is Councillor Buckley, just before the bell. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of quick questions. Thank you for this report, and I just acknowledge that the communities have responded to what was such a difficult event, especially for those who lived through the process of what we were faced with. And I just want to acknowledge the incredible work that I've seen communities come together and do, and it's the council assisting that process is a very important one. But places like Malakuta, I mean, it was just incredible, the systems that they put in place. So well done to all the communities. My question is around the homes that were provided when the event took place. Are they still in use? And what will be the outcome of those? And also, my second question is, we offered rate relief for those homes that were burnt down and people who were affected. Is that still ongoing, or is that something that will now be reviewed?
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Firstly, just to note your comment about the incredible work of community volunteers, and I too would share that and recognise. I've personally been inspired by the leadership of some of those community volunteers as they've worked their way through. In terms of the short-term modular houses, a number of those are still in use, so there's roughly 30-something still in use. We're currently in discussions with Emergency Recovery Victoria in terms of their plans in relation to those, and they're working through individually with each of the people who have those houses still on their properties about their pathway from here, and a number of them our staff are actively working with in terms of rebuilding. So whilst they're still in the short-term modular house, they have a pathway to rebuilding. So that's work that's continuing. the rate relief for those who lost their house during the 1920 fires is in place for this current year that we're in, and consideration for the future, but it is in place for the current rating year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillor White, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Following on from Sonia's question regarding the end time for these mobile homes, Stuart, I think what she's probably getting at, are they going to be available for other uses, or do they have to be returned, say, to the state government? Because, of course, we've been discussing over previous meetings and briefings the problem of the shortage of affordable housing, and, you know, is there a way that, as they're not required for people who have rebuilt after the fires and have been living in them, could they be reassigned a use for people who've got nowhere to live for other reasons, like the homeless?
Yep. Thanks, Councillor White. Certainly all of those questions, I think, are working their way through with Emergency Recovery Victoria. For clarity, the short-term modular houses remain the property of Emergency Recovery Victoria, and those landholders that required one have a lease type arrangement with Emergency Recovery Victoria, with, you know, appropriate hardship provisions where required to ensure that it's affordable in their specific context. So the decisions about what the future use of those facilities are, once they're no longer required by the individuals currently using them, sits with Emergency Recovery Victoria. But again, we can highlight that suggestion in our discussions with them.
Yes, it would be good. It was perhaps put on our advocacy list, you know, to lobby for a use for them, rather than them be returned to a site and all packed in a great big pile and nobody uses them.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? I see none, in which case we do have an officer recommendation before us. Do I have a mover for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Reeves. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Councillors, we know that the recovery process is long, and this 4-year document doesn't at all touch on the recovery requirements or the recovery needs of many individuals and communities. And just to reiterate our continued commitment to support the recovery intentions of those individuals, as has been discussed. I think that, as has been noted, just to acknowledge the incredible work of not just the staff involved in the recovery process here through the Shire, but also the volunteers, especially the CRCs right across. And each one has put their own mark, and it's been a place-based recovery, and it's been a really amazing process. And I think, as has been mentioned by other councillors, this particular document pays in really important reference to those 5 pillars of recovery around social, economic, the built, natural and cultural environments. And I'm really proud to see this document and to have those pillars acknowledged, and this will only get better and better as we learn more and more about the recovery process. But this also feeds into the planning preparation process as well in future. So it's a really important document for us to reflect on and use as a scaffold for what we do in the future. Absolutely delighted to see it. A shame that we have to see it, but that was the event that occurred, and here we are now 4 years later.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Stowe.
Look, I really can't add to that. It was beautifully summed up by Councillor Reeves, and fully support him.
Would anybody like to speak against the motion? No? In that case, would anybody like to speak for the motion? Councillor Greason.
I would just like to recommend that that this report is disseminated widely, made available widely. It's really well written. It talks about the work of the community recovery committees in the 10 communities that sort of suffered most through these fires, and and now floods, and I think it's a beautiful document. Thank you very much to those who prepared it, and as councillors have said before, just huge thanks to the community people who've put so much time and effort into supporting recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Buckley.
Also in favour of this report. I know it's always a hard question to ask, was the money well spent? With the hope that none of it was wasted and that it went to the right places at the right time and it helped the people that needed it the most. And I can only hope that that was the case for the money that we were ensuring that we had done the right thing with it. So I commend the report, and I hope never to have to live through another bushfire. I've seen enough of them, and I think that we need to ensure that we put money into the future, into prevention, and that means keeping our roadsides clear of grass and weeds, and that should be a good focal point for us to work towards in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. The next report on the next agenda item is number 5.1.4, Economic Development Advisory Committee unconfirmed minutes, 16th of October 2023. General Manager for Place and Community, could you please present your report? Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes are presented for your information and also to bring transparency and to the work of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. The minutes are there for your consideration and awareness. A key focus in the meeting on the 16th of October was around investment facilitation and that focus on council being open for business, and so there was good advice provided back in relation to that. So I'll present those, and you have the recommendation to receive and note the report in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there any questions? I see none, in which case there is an officer recommendation. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Greason, a seconder please. Councillor Stowe. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
They're a good set of minutes for an evolving committee. Looking forward to seeing that continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Stowe.
Nothing to add to that.
Thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri.
Just to say that I think this is the first time we've seen the minutes at a formal council meeting, but I might be mistaken about that. But if it is the first, then I just want to commend the process. I think it's really good for us to see them and for them to be available for the community to see them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Which moves us on to agenda item 5.1.5, which is the Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee Council briefing confirmed minutes of August 17, 2023 and the unconfirmed minutes of 16th of November 2023. General Manager of Place and Community, Stuart, if you could please present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Again, you have before you the minutes of the Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee for two meetings, 17th of August and 16th of November, for your consideration, awareness and transparency. And yes, in response to Councillor Uri, this is our practice now with these committee meetings. The committees is to ensure that the information is brought to the whole councillor group, not just the representatives who attend, and also to bring it into the public domain. And I think there was some good discussion within the last meeting there in terms of the opportunities for us in terms of best use of water resources and how that can enhance our agricultural sector and the economic production from that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillor, is there any questions? No, I see none, in which case we do have an officer recommendation before us. Do I have a mover for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Greason. I think Councillor White might have got there first. Thank you, John. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Sorry about that. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Yes, we ride on the back of the wool of the sheep, as they say, and I think that the agricultural, this is the agricultural one that I've just had a mind blank that I'm voting on.
That is correct, it is.
Yes, yeah, it just jumped to a wrong page. Look, it's really important. I fully support the committee and the work that they do, and I think it's really great to see that we can publicly put that to the forefront of people's mind for the small amount of people that are watching our show tonight. But the work that they do is our, it's the economic benefit to our region is quite phenomenal. So I'll put the motion forward, and I ask all councillors to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. And Councillor White, would you like to speak for the motion, please?
Yes, thank you. This committee's been around a little bit longer than the Economic Committee, but it's evolved. The members have gained more confidence in what they're there for and their advice that they give, but also in each meeting there are some really good presentations that enlighten both the members and those others who are watching, and of course the council staff. So it is a worthwhile committee. They're doing good work, and that's sort of proven by some of the things that they have already participated in advising council for things like budgets and other items. So yes, so I congratulate those members and hope that they remain as participants, although we have had a couple of changes, and we've got some members there that are getting started now. So it's just good to see that this committee is working very well, and it's doing what it was envisaged to do for supporting council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri.
Thank you. Just to continue that theme of transparency, obviously there's a lot of interest between the councillors around the Economic Development Advisory Board and the Ag Sector Advisory Board. A lot of us are observers in those committees because we're interested in them, and of course prior to this we have had access to the minutes of the meetings. But it is a bit of a change to see them in the public domain. So I encourage anybody who's interested to look at the minutes and to follow what's being done in those committees, because they're very important to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving right along, agenda item 5.2.1, the interim appointment to the Destination Gippsland Limited Board. Ms Weigel, I think this one sits with you. If you'd like to present your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the report before you seeks to appoint Stuart McConnell as a director on the Destination Gippsland Board until such time as we have appointed an ongoing CEO. As the report outlines, and as you well know, Destination Gippsland is the peak regional tourism body for Gippsland, and given our reliance on the visitor economy, it serves an important function for East Gippsland. The structure of the company of the board is set up as a company limited by guarantee with 6 financial directors, of which East Gippsland is one of the financial members. and we appointed our CEO as a director. Now, interestingly, the Constitution appoints the person rather than the position, so we have to appoint a person to the board to replace Anthony now that he has resigned from his Gippsland Shire Council. So I believe that, as the report outlines, it's most appropriate that we appoint Stuart McConnell, given his portfolio includes tourism and economic development, as we've already heard tonight. So, councillors, there's some recommendations before you, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillors, are there any questions? I see none. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Stowe, a seconder, Councillor Allen. Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Would you like to speak to the motion, please?
This is largely procedural and it does fit within Stuart's field of expertise, so happy to move it.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
About what he said, I think, sums it up.
Thank you. And is the motion opposed? Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is passed unanimously. CEO. The next report is item 5.3.1, Capital Works and Major Projects Quarter 2, 2023-2024, and I'll ask the Acting General Manager for Assets and Environment, Mr Wayne Richards, to please now present your report. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, this report summarises the progress of the capital works and major projects for Quarter 2, ending 31st of December 2023. At the end of Quarter 2, I'm pleased to report 59.6% of the forecast budget has been expended or committed across a program of 244 projects. The report before you details the budget variances, changes to grant funding, which is predominantly due to Marine Parade Stage 2, amounts brought forward, summary of the holding account, which the balance as at 31st of December is 512,000, and carry forwards. So there's a detailed list provided in the report, but it should be noted that 2 significant projects, so the World and Omeo Mountain Bike Trail, will require carry forwards, but this cannot be estimated until the outcome of the Building Better Regions grant acquittals are known. Also advises of contracts awarded under delegation, of which there are 7. So the report, I'm happy to present the report and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Richards. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Greeson.
I have 2 questions. Thank you, Wayne. So the first one is in relation to so the changes to the funding during Quarter 2, Marine Parade Stage 1 and Stage 2 in Lakes Entrance, the variations not approved after Infrastructure Investment Program review. Are there likely to be any impacts on not proceeding?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Greeson. I can advise that we will be proceeding with works for Stage 1. Planning is also proceeding on parking and drainage repair. In relation to Stage 2, we're seeking other funding sources to proceed with a range of potential options, and when appropriate funding is identified, applications will be made, but we're proceeding with planning for Stage 2 as well.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. I have another question.
Please.
Thank you. And I've asked this before, but just for the sake of anyone who might be listening, would you mind explaining in detail what is entailed in designs that make them so expensive?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Greeson. So I think, I guess these design costs relate to the detail design, so it's not just of the soccer pitches, but also of the construction of a pavilion. So it's actually, I mean, there's lots of elements to it. It's actually quite complex. But so there's multiple services, multiple components. It's not just a concept plan. And I suppose the other point of relevance is that it's comparable to the design fees for projects of a similar scope. We work with a percentage figure of the total cost, and this is within that estimation.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to seem parochial here. I am going to ask a few questions about OMEO. The first one is about the OMEO Council precinct. The funding was unsuccessful. Can you just explain that to me and what that will mean? Project.
I might need to take that one on notice, Councillor Buckley. Without having the background in the OMEO report in front of me, I'm not able to answer that right now.
Okay, fair enough. I should have given you some notice. I do apologise. Is it possible to ask a question in regards to the OMEO depot, the changes to that? That's on hold at the moment. Is that just because it's going through certain processes to start its implementation?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Buckley. My understanding is that there's a briefing coming to Council in the near future, which will detail that precinct. So I expect that there'll be more detail provided in that report.
I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Stowe.
I seem to recall we lost about 16 wooden bridges during the fire, which were replaced almost immediately. And I note here that we've replaced or in the process of replacing others. Do we have many wooden bridges still to be replaced?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Stowe. I'm advised that there's 5 wooden bridges to be replaced, which should be replaced in the near future.
And so what time frame are we looking at there, roughly?
My understanding is that the end of next year, or is it the end of next financial year? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Richards and Mr Stowe. Councillors, are there any further questions? In which case there is an officer recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Greason. Would anybody like to second the motion? Oh, Councillor Van Diggle, thank you there online. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak? Oh, wait a minute here.
To the capital works and major projects.
Well, actually, Councillor Greason, my notes advise me that I would like to ask you to please complete the blanks. I think that might be a slight misprint there. So yes, if you'd just like to speak to the motion.
Thank you. Look, I just want to thank everyone for preparing this document and keeping us up to date with what's happening. It's a procedural thing. Thank you. It's a record.
And Councillor Van Diggle.
No, I have no further comments. Thank you.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Councillors, we'll now move on to agenda item number 6, which is urgent business. Ms Weigel, I believe there is no urgent business for this evening's meeting, is that correct?
I've received no urgent business.
Thank
That's right.
you. In which case we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is confidential business. And we have 2 items listed in the agenda as confidential business. Councillors, I will need a motion that Council close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following items. Item 7.1, which is listed as a personal matter number 1, and item 7.2, which is listed as a personal matter number 2. Do I have a motion for that? I believe I saw Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Reeves.
Yep,
Thank
happy to do
you,
that.
Councillor Reeves. Would you like to speak to the motion? Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, councillors, for your significant deliberations on those confidential matters. It's nice to have some resolution and to be moving forward with those issues, which now brings us to agenda item number 8, which is the meeting close. So thank you, councillors. That concludes the proceedings for tonight's meeting. Thank you, everybody in the public gallery who took the time to come tonight. And for those still watching online, if there are any of you, or watching retrospectively, I'll now declare this meeting closed, with the time being 8:42. Thank you and good evening.
Thanks, Mayor. Good night, everyone.
See you, Sonia. See you, John. See you, Kirsten.